Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be discussing the autobiography of Sam Walton, Made in America. For those of you who are not familiar with Sam Walton, the hat might be a giveaway. This man is the founder of Walmart, and he leaves us with a very mixed legacy. He doesn't really address this in his autobiography, in part because he set a stone rolling that would gather more momentum after his death. And he has some myopia as to the beginnings of those problems. We'll get to that, but I want to start with the good news first because I said it's a mixed legacy, which means there are some good things, not only to be admired about the man himself, but in the way that he built a company and some of the things that he encouraged in his people. And let's start with that. So this is after somebody had started to drown. Donald got into water too deep for him and called for help. Lloyd Jones, who had accompanied the boys, made an effort to get him out, but Donald's struggles pulled Mr. Jones down several times. Young Walton, who was some distance away, got to the pair just as Donald went down a fifth time. He grasped him from behind, as he had been taught to do, pulled him to shore, and applied artificial respiration that scouts must become proficient in. Donald was unconscious and his whole body had turned blue. It took quite a while to bring him around. They said I saved his life. Maybe yes, maybe no. Newspapers tend to exaggerate these things. But at least I got him out of the water. Looking back on such boyhood episodes helps me to realize now that I've always had a strong bias towards action, a trait that has been a big part of the Walmart story. This is something that I encourage in myself, I encourage in the people around me. I've alluded to it in other reviews, particularly one that I did for the 4-hour work week. I can put a link to that in the description as well as a card. A bad decision is better than no decision, because with a bad decision, at least you get information. With no decision, you get nothing. This is David Glass, who would succeed Sam as CEO for Walmart. Two things about Sam Walton distinguish him from about everyone else I know. First, he gets up every day bound and determined to improve something. Second, he is less afraid of being wrong than anyone I've ever known. And once he sees he's wrong, he just shakes it off and heads in another direction. It's important to see being wrong not as a bad thing in and of itself, but as a necessary and important part of the journey. You don't always get things right. You're going to have to make mistakes. And in fact, the harder you try, the more mistakes you're going to make because you're going to be exposing yourself to more opportunities. This is from one of Sam's employees, Jack Shoemaker. I had written some policy manuals for both Kroger and Coast to Coast hardware stores out of Minneapolis. So Sam and Ferold called me in and said, we want you to come in and write up our policies and procedures for us. I said, well, that's nice, but that's not really what I would like to do. I want to work with the merchandising people. And Sam said, well, we would kind of like you to do it anyway. How long do you think it would take to do it? I knew from experience it would take 6 months to a year to properly do this job. But I said, I'll do it in 90 days. Sam replied, you've got 60 days. Sam never wants to wait for anything. He has no patience. That was probably the meld between us, that bias towards action. Anyway, we published it, 360 pages of it, in 59 days. And this is Parkinson's law in effect, which, again, I mentioned in the 4-hour workweek review. The longer amount of time you give yourself to do something, the larger it can spiral into a big out-of-control project. And this doesn't necessarily mean that you should have told him, well, I can do it in 24 hours. That's crazy. But by giving himself a tighter deadline, he said to himself, I thought it would take 6 months to a year, but I said, I'll do it in 90 days. So he gave himself this window to do something above and beyond what he thought was reasonable, and he got it done in 59 days after Sam had told him to get it done in 60. I love it. Something else you hear me talk about on the channel frequently is the importance of having that neuroplasticity, having a student mind, and always being open to new ideas. This is Kurt Barnard, who's talking about Sam. When he meets you, he looks at you, head cocked to one side, forehead slightly creased, and he proceeds to extract every piece of information in your possession. He always makes little notes, and he pushes on and on. After 2.5 hours, he left, and I was totally drained. I wasn't sure what I had just met, but I was sure we would hear more from him. This is from Herb Fisher, who was the CEO of Jamesway Corporation. Sam has always been clear about his attitude towards competition. Meet them head on. Competition will make us a better company. He is that way with everyone. Personally, he's such a fine, unassuming, quiet gentleman, but he's always picking your brain, and he always has a notebook or that tape recorder. He'll learn everything you know, but he shares that information freely with you in return. Now, of course, he's a competitor to James Way, but he would never apologize for that. He thinks it makes us a better company, and he's right. And that is true. Having competition can challenge you. The problem is Sam sees, and we'll see this later, competition as something required for life. That if you don't have competition, things are really bad. But that's not true, particularly in small towns. And we'll get to that later. The discounting mentality that drives Walmart all the way through from the corporate office all the way down to customers is something you have to understand if you're going to understand how Walmart works, even to this present day. My simple philosophy: buy it low, stack it high, sell it cheap. And here Sam was taking on a philosophy that he saw in someone else, and he loved it. Why did he choose Walmart? To begin with, there's not as many letters to buy. So he had bought a franchise previously called Ben Franklin. It was part of discounting stores, and there were more letters in Ben Franklin than there were in Walmart. So even here, thinking about the name of the company, it's a shorter name. When customers thought of Walmart, they should think of low prices and satisfaction guaranteed. They could be pretty sure they wouldn't find it cheaper anywhere else, and if they didn't like it, they could bring it back. This was the original spirit of Walmart that Sam created. And I would say I remember from my younger days in America, I remembered that. That was my experience at Walmart. It was a positive one. A lot of first time visitors are kind of shocked by our executive offices. Most people say my office and those of all the other Walmart executives look like something you'd find in a truck terminal. We're in a one-story office warehouse building. The offices aren't real big, and the walls are covered with inexpensive paneling. We never had fancy furniture or thick carpet or suites with bars for our executives. I like them just the way they are. We sure as heck won't win any interior decorating awards, but they're all we need, and they must be working fine. Just ask our shareholders. And this doesn't work for everybody, but I have to appreciate that the mentality goes all the way through the organization. And at that time, before Walmart developed a collection of corporate jets, which I know that sounds silly, but you have to realize a lot of Walmarts are in smaller cities where there's not really good service. So they'd have to spend more money on airfares, and then they'd have to rent cars to get everywhere. Whereas if they just put their managers on private jets, they can get them around a lot more efficiently, and it actually costs less to operate the private jet. I know that sounds crazy, but if you look at the math of it, it's true. There's plenty of people who've done videos on this. So there is a mentality all the way through Walmart of low prices. But when you create that as the only thing that matters, you you have to understand that there's going to be negative effects from that. In Sam's mind, there was always only positive from saving money. Saving money and making shareholders happy, that was Sam's life. But he couldn't understand that there could be any negative effects from this drive, this race to the bottom. He had really great systems and philosophies for training his team. Here's one of them from one of his staff. When you own and manage your distribution and logistics channel, you have a great competitive advantage over companies that rely on third-party suppliers. It automatically shortens your lead times, but also you can consistently look for ways to improve your operation and try to make it more efficient. You never have to rely on what's going on in somebody else's shop. In our case, we generally know where things are in relationship to when we want them to arrive, so we can schedule and plan to move goods into the stores at the right time. That maximizes our in-stock positions, which is vital. You can't generate sales unless you have the product there when the customer wants it. And when this came out in 1992, that was probably quite cutting edge. Almost everybody has that now, but Walmart was one of the pioneers in creating that inventory system and getting the intelligence from what was selling every day being fed into a computer. And so everyone was learning, oh, this product's really selling. We should buy more of that. We should move other things. He also has the idea within his teams, he puts it as the phrase, push responsibility and authority down. And that is a Catholic principle as well called subsidiarity, which is the idea of handling things at the lowest level possible so that you don't have to bring something up to higher authorities when you can solve it at a lower level. So this idea, push responsibility and authority down, that's classic, important, has been working since the Middle Ages and probably before that time. Force ideas to bubble up. And that means if I'm pushing responsibility and authority down, it means that I'm giving people the opportunity to share ideas, not only for making life easier, but for saving money. And in the book, he gives more than one example of, in fact, I'll read this example. One of my favorites came from an hourly associate in our traffic department who got to wondering why we were shipping all the fixtures we bought for our warehouses by common carrier when we own the largest private fleet of trucks in America. She figured out a program to backhaul those things on our own trucks and saved us over $500,000 right there. We brought her in, recognized her good thinking, and gave her a cash award. When you consider there are 400,000 of us, it's obvious that there are more than a few good ideas out there waiting to be plucked. So she helps the company save money. They give her an award. They give her money to thank her for that. And that could only happen if you were in a company where you felt respected. And it was clear that Walton had created a company where his employees loved him. The customers loved him. So in that era, in which he was still around and still having a strong influence, these were probably some of the earliest days in which I was exposed to Walmart, and there was a lot of positivity around the Walmart brand because of that. This is from David Glass. If you don't zero in on your bureaucracy every so often, you will naturally build in layers. You never set out to add bureaucracy. You just get it, period, without even knowing it. So you always have to be looking to eliminate it. You know, when Tom Watson Sr. was running IBM, he decided they would never have more than 4 layers from the chairman of the board to the lowest level in the company. That may have been one of the greatest single reasons why IBM was successful. And that is important. Flattening your organization so that you don't have all of these extra layers of management that make it really bulky and hard to run the company. Then he gives a number of principles here. I'm just going to read a few of them just because I know as a business owner how much these things matter. Commit to your business. Believe in it more than anybody else. Motivate your partners. Money and ownership aren't enough. Communicate everything you possibly can to your partners. The more they know, the more they'll understand. Appreciate everything your associates do for the business. A paycheck and a stock option will buy only one kind of loyalty. But all of us like to be told how much somebody appreciates what we do for them. We like to hear it often. Sam wasn't content with only helping his shareholders and his employees. He also would help others. In the last 10 years, we have funded a special scholarship program we started, which sends kids from Central America to college here in Arkansas. Right now, we've got about 180 of them enrolled at 3 different Arkansas schools, and we pay about $13,000 a year per student to provide tuition, transportation, books, and room and board. Closer to home, the Walton family sponsors 70 scholarships of $6,000 each year for children of Walmart associates. And this is in 1992 money. I'm sure you might think that's not a lot of money now. I'm sure that's probably been adjusted over time. And way before anybody announced any tariffs or before NAFTA or any of these things, Sam Walton was really focused on the idea. He's saying buying American, but what he really means is buying local, buying regionally, buying in your country, which any country should have. So if I'm in Vietnam, I want to buy Vietnamese. If I'm in China, I want to buy Chinese. If I'm in Russia, I want to buy Russian. Not because you want to, quote unquote, make your country great again necessarily, but because you want to support the people who live with you, because that money stays there. If the money goes out to other places, and this ironically comes back to the Walmart situation later on, then they can't build up that community, can't build up that region, can't build up that country. And so it's important to think about where you buy your goods from. And so he was thinking about this himself. Our primary goal became to work with American manufacturers and see if our formidable buying power could help them deliver the goods and in the process save some American manufacturing jobs. I sent out an open letter to our suppliers inviting them to work with us on the program. Walmart believes American workers can make the difference, I told them, if management provides the leadership. We were surprised ourselves at the results. It turned out that if Walmart committed to high volume purchases well in advance of shipping deadlines, a lot of American manufacturers could save enough on the purchase of materials, personnel scheduling, and inventory costs to realize significant efficiency gains. So, in fact, they could turn out a wide variety of merchandise flannel shirts, candles, men's knit shirts, lady sweaters, etc. at competitive prices. We also took a close look at our overseas buying practices and discovered a number of hidden costs, such as having to own inventory from the time it leaves port on a ship. Using that data, we developed a formula which enabled us to make a true apples-to-apples cost comparison of buying something overseas versus buying it at home. Now, if we can get within 5% of the same price and quality, we take a smaller markup and go with the American product. What we learned was that we had fallen into a pattern of knee-jerk import buying without really examining possible alternatives. In the past, we would just take our best-selling US-made items, send them to the Orient and say, see if you can make something like this. We could use 100,000 units of this or more if the quality holds up. I'm sure a lot of other retailers do the same thing. Today, we instruct our buyers to make trips to places like Greenville, South Carolina, Dothan, Alabama, Aurora, Missouri, and hundreds of other out-of-the-way places in Pennsylvania, New York, Ohio, or New Hampshire, before just routinely dashing off a letter of credit to the Far East. If we could take a little trouble to work out some of these deals, and the manufacturers will continue to come up with their own creative programs, I think there's a tremendous amount of untapped potential left in this idea. Amazing. Wonderful. However, we'll see where this morphs to. If this had stayed the thinking of Walmart, incredible things could have happened. But that is not where Walmart went in its trajectory. If you're enjoying this content, consider hitting like, subscribe. It's a free way that you can support this channel and a way to get the word out to other people about the channel. And consider looking back at some of the other videos. This is not necessarily a prototypical video because there is no prototypical video. We like talking about all sorts of different types of books on this channel. So I told you we were going to get to the bad news, and now we're going to have to get to that bad news. And I'll start by talking about what Walton was talking about here with the idea of buying American. If the idea was simply, we want to get good prices, and if it's within 5%, then we'll just eat the lower markup and have it made here. That isn't the way Walmart works now. The way Walmart works now is they tell you what they're willing to pay for something, and you either meet it or you lose the bid. And it doesn't matter if you've been with Walmart for 10 years, they'll kick you to the curb if another supplier can do it cheaper. That is not really the way that Sam Walton operated, but it's the culture that he fostered, which he didn't realize would grow out of control after he died and after his family was no longer in control of the day-to-day operations. That it would turn into money is the only thing that matters. Share price is the only thing that matters. Low costs are the only thing that matters, and that means people, businesses, local things don't matter. Part of that thinking derives from a lopsided and unfortunate way that Sam would look at things. And funny thing is, I've been to Bentonville, and I've had a chance to go to the Walmart Museum, and downtown Bentonville is sort of this dreamy 1950s cutout of a small town. And Sam doesn't realize, well, Sam's dead now, he couldn't possibly realize this, but Walmart destroyed towns that used to look like Bentonville looks like today. And Bentonville can only look like the way it is today because it is swimming in money. Bentonville is absolutely swimming in money. And it does that because, unfortunately, Walmart has extracted the life force out of all these small towns in America and absolutely collapsed them. So here's some of the mischaracterizations that Sam puts forward about these small town retailers. What happened was that they didn't really commit to discounting. They held on to their old variety store concepts too long. They were so accustomed to getting their 45% markup, they never let go. It was hard for them to take a blouse they'd been selling for $8 and sell it for $5 and only make 30%. With our low costs, our low expense structures, and our low prices, we were ending an era in the heartland. We shut the door on variety store thinking. We also shut the door on variety stores, period. It's a question, Sam is trying to characterize that, he's just a little guy and he's coming in to compete with another store. He's an absolute, even at the time, he was an absolute giant coming in to compete with one little store. And so he's trying to say, oh, look at this little store. And all he has to do is compete with me. And he's competing. He's not just competing with one little store. He's competing with the entire Walmart corporation with all of its computer data. Even at this time, they were quite early on in the computer era. And they had all this information. And he's just trying to say, well, you just have to be plucky and fight. And if you don't, you're just lazy. This was just a bad characterization. Of all the notions I've heard about Walmart, none has ever baffled me more than this idea that we are somehow the enemy of small-town America. Nothing could be further from the truth. Walmart has actually kept quite a number of small towns from becoming practically extinct by offering low prices and saving literally billions of dollars for the people who live there, as well as by creating hundreds of thousands of jobs in our stores. I don't have any trouble understanding why some merchant who's having a hard time competing with us wouldn't be too happy with our being there. What I haven't been able to figure out at all is these people who have decided we're somehow responsible for the decline of the small town. My guess is that a lot of these critics are folks who grew up in small towns and then deserted them for the big cities decades ago. Okay, so let's stop there because he's conflating the idea the people who are complaining are people in the big cities. No, the people complaining were in the small towns. And for those outside of America, you may not understand this, so I'll have to give you some idea. If you think about a small town in America, you would have these little stores, let's say an optometrist, a variety store, which carried all sorts of different things, a hardware store, a sporting goods store, a television and appliances store, a drugstore. All of the people who own those separate stores, yes, they may have charged slightly more. So instead of being able to buy I'm looking for something here. Okay, so let's say binder clips. So instead of being able to buy a package of binder clips for $2 like you could at Walmart, it was $3.50 maybe, okay, at one of these variety stores. And Sam thinks that's a great travesty. But what he doesn't realize and doesn't connect the dots is that local store that sold it for $3.50 paid wages to someone locally. They hired a local bookkeeper to do their taxes. They probably often usually served on a school board or worked in local government, volunteered their time, committed money to a local Little League team. These people were bastions of their community. And when Walmart came in and moved out of town and offered all of these things, they offered optometry and they offered drugstore and they offered plumbing and they offered hardware store. All these businesses went out of business. Yes, small town America was dying in other parts for its own reasons, unrelated to Walmart, but Walmart did not help. So Sam wants to take credit. It's like, well, we gave all these jobs. Like, well, they aren't necessarily awesome jobs, and they don't replace business ownership. So the idea that a average paying job with pretty fantastic stock options is better than owning your own business is crazy. And Sam's effectively making that argument here. And it's a dumb one. Because when you hollow out these small businesses, now you have a ghost downtown. But that's not all. All those businesses paid taxes. All those people probably served in the elite of the community. Now you've lost the leadership of the community. You've lost some of the cohesion. You lost some of the people who would lend money to people who were down. And their luck, you lost local employers. And now you have to share these jobs with everyone in the surrounding area. That's fine that you save them money. But saving people money doesn't save a small town. And this is where Sam is really delusional. I think what happened to Walmart in all this is that we got to be a certain size and became so well known as the small town merchants that we became an easy target. Certain folks figured that they could create a niche for themselves, a platform from which to express their views about small town America by zeroing in on us. The whole thing taught me a lesson about the way the national media seems to think. And here, again, Sam has some persecution complex as if there's no relationship to the hollowing out of small towns and what Walmart was doing in the way that it created things. Here's something else. Here's another direction which I really don't appreciate Sam taking. I don't want to be too critical of small town merchants, but the truth is that a lot of these folks just weren't doing a very good job of taking care of their customers before we or somebody else came in and offered something new. And they didn't do a very good job of reacting to our arrival either. You know, there have been articles and even one little book written on how to compete with us, and I've got a few suggestions of my own. So the idea is these people weren't doing that good of a job, and so when we come in, the idea that people are going to pay a lot more money to work with their own small town people instead of driving 15 minutes and saving a lot of money at Walmart. That's what Sam was operating on. And he then attributes that to, well, they weren't taking care of their people, and that's why they came to Walmart. No, people, particularly Americans, I'm not going to speak for many other cultures or countries, but I'm just speaking for Americans as an American. I'm telling you, we like to save money. And so if we have to drive a little bit to do it, we'll do it. We're not going to accept the argument, well, I have to pay more money so I can support my local business. That long-term thinking with deep understanding of the economy and communities has long been lost to Americans. So Sam is trying to attribute this, well, the reason they came to Walmart is because these people weren't taking care of their own people, as if the small town America was systematically dysfunctional. But this is crazy because the person at the hardware store was your next door neighbor. So if he was cheating you, he would hear it and everyone else would hear it, and suddenly you wouldn't go to the hardware merchant. These people still managed to be in business, and it wasn't because they were cheating everybody. But Sam is somewhat making this connection, and it's unfair and unfortunate. No doubt there were people who were like that, but to characterize small town America mostly as this is wrong on Sam's part. In the case of hardware stores, I don't deny that we've been hard on some of them too, but if they're in a decent location, they shouldn't have that much trouble with Walmart. It's the one kind of store for which I have the least sympathy because, frankly, a good, smart hardware store operator can just beat us to death if he thinks about what he's doing and commits to putting up a fight. Again, why does he have to put up a fight? He wanted to stay in his small town and help his people, and now this huge company with all the millions of dollars of resources publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange, and he's required to put up a fight. He didn't ask for this, and no one in life is required to fight for their business. The idea that, well, you're not a patriotic American, you don't really believe in your business, and you don't believe in your people if you're not willing to fight, that wasn't what he signed up for. If I'm a dentist in a small town, it's because I want a different type of life than being a dentist in the big city. It's also a lifestyle choice. And so some people wanted to have a small business in their town, and they were committed to doing that. And so they don't have to run their business like a publicly traded giant corporation, which is what Walmart is. And so holding them to those standards is unreasonable and frankly ridiculous. The other problem is Walmart originally was just this discounter, but as it got more efficient and turned into the behemoth that it is to this day, which is effectively a smaller version of Amazon, it became this, it changed the landscape of American retail. And now we have this phrase, big box retailer, in American English. And I'm sure it might exist in other cultures and expressed in different ways now. But that's really what it is. It's this big, ugly box. And I'm going to link to a video from a channel called Not Just Bikes. I think he's a Canadian who moved to the Netherlands. He can sometimes be a little bit irritating with some of his political views, but he makes really good videos about transportation and infrastructure. And in particular, he took this on. So I'll put a link to that video. But in short, what he goes through in painstaking detail and explains that a lot of these large buildings that Walmart has in position, they negotiate with cities for them. So they get roads run out to these buildings, sewer, all this stuff. They usually get some kind of tax abatement. But these big box ugly buildings are only good for about 15 years. So after 15 years, they move out and they have this eyesore that really can't be used for other purposes. And sometimes Walmart structures it so that it's leased. And it's easier for them to just keep the lease on this building rather than turn it over to anyone else. So you now have an eyesore and you have lost tax revenue. And as I alluded to earlier, you have all of the hollowed out businesses that were closed and driven out of business because of Walmart. And so Walmart is actually, in many cases, a death knell to the community. Walmart moves in somewhere and get ready for the giant sucking sound of all of that money that would have gone into the local community now goes to Walmart corporate headquarters. And that isn't, I don't, from everything that I read in this autobiography, that isn't what Sam's original vision was, but this is the company that he's built. And that is his legacy, a legacy of a company that's destroyed local businesses, that has hollowed out small town America in concert with other forces that don't have anything to do with Walmart. And they are the single biggest contributor of the decline of the American small town. That cannot be taken away from the fact that Americans chose that. Walmart didn't force anybody to do this, but they made it easier for Americans to choose low prices over their own small towns, and we're all paying the price for that now. So, as I said at the beginning of this review, a mixed legacy. I have much admiration for Sam Walton. As I said before, I love Bentonville. It's a place worth visiting on its own, despite this mixed legacy. But it's an example of the fact that family businesses, once they leave the family, they're publicly traded, they become a heartless, amoral monster, and only care about one thing and one thing only, and it isn't humanity. And that's something worth pondering, considering, realizing when you look at the legacy of Sam Walton and Walmart. If you'd like to support the work for a free way, a low cost way that doesn't cost you anybody, just hit like, subscribe, share this video with people you think might be interested. If you'd like to thank me for this video, there's links to Buy Me a Coffee and PayPal below. If you'd like to be part of this on an ongoing basis and get early access to reviews like this one and get private member-only videos, there's links to Patreon and YouTube. And finally, if you'd like to nominate books for this, you'll see an Amazon wishlist below. Click through there. You'll see books on both this as well as on Palestine. That's my other channel, Palestine Bookshelf. So obviously, if you want to nominate a book for this channel, don't buy a book on Palestine. That'll nominate a book. You simply buy it, have it sent to me, and in a way that's you sponsoring the video. And once I get that book, I'll try to review it as quickly as I can. Until next time, enjoy your reading.